How's it going, church family? Good to be here. Good to see you all. Good to be seen. I guess I could say we don't see you guys,
We wish we did.
but we wish we could so badly.
Yeah.
But it's
This
great.
is not live, but
This is not live.
what? Come on.
Let's be honest. You guys don't know what day it is, but good morning. Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
We're happy that you could join us in another discussion, another conversation about another interesting topic. I'm joined by my friends, Josh and Joel. My name is Isai. I'm sure we don't need introduction at this point, but thank you for joining us. We're glad that you've taken that step to click on the link to watch this video. Make sure if you like it to share it with your friends. But we're going to get into it.
Too.
Subscribe.
Comment below.
Give it a like. Give it a comment. And we're going to dig into lesson number 10. Lesson number 10. And it's another study on how to interpret scripture. Josh will be guiding us through this interesting study. So Josh,
I feel safe. I feel safe.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to be able to share with you all. You know, I think it especially times that we're living in, I think all of us, we can agree that our hearts are aching for heaven, you know, just with everything that's been going on. This has been a crazy year. And I think it's so important to look at the scriptures, because it's you know, this whole lesson, this whole quarter has been reminding us that the Bible is not just any spiritual book, but that it's a trustworthy book because of who it represents. And I think just with everything that's going on, I think we need to seek the scriptures more, and learning how to interpret it, learning how to see it, I think can definitely be a comfort for sure. So this week we are talking about the Bible as history. The Bible is not a history book, but it does share so much about history and leading us to the ultimate goal of restoration and of Jesus coming back, right? That's the historical nature. It's something that just makes it so different than any of the other books, any of the historical books, because it mentions some things that are very you know, that can be used, right, to do history, right? What are some of your thoughts going into the lesson, y'all?
I think for me, and this is my love and hate relationship with this quarterly, but for me, more than calling the Bible a history book, I would have called it a storybook. Right? Obviously, there's some historical, and the lesson goes to that, some historical proof that the stories that we believe to be true are true and not just made up, which is great, right? But I think that more than that, I think we often associate history with accuracy, right? And then that's when some beef into how some of the historical parts of the Bible are told, and sometimes they don't seem to quite fit or whatever it is. But I do think the Bible is a storybook in the sense that it is there to tell us a lot of stories comprised in a big story, which part of it is provable, right? Through historical findings.
I love it, man.
I love it. I think I would also agree. I would also say it's, as cheesy as it may sound, it's his story. It's the story of God. Like Josh said, not to call it a history book, because that would be actually taking away from what it actually is, and trying to minimize it into something with trying to take away its power almost. But what I realized through the story of God, the story that God has given to us through the Bible, is that God is a very personal God, that he's involved in humanity, in his creation, that he created us. He's been involved all throughout history, and he loves us. And it's God being personal with humanity and God being personal with us today.
For sure. And that definitely takes us into history. One of the first stories that it points us to is this amazing story of David facing Goliath, right? And a lot of times, right? Oh, this is just a kid's story, right? This is, and we probably learned it as children. But it's one of those stories that is just so awesome. And I just want us to look at 1 Samuel 17, and if Isai, if you can read just the first 3 verses, and we're just going to unpack a little bit. We're not going to get into the whole chapter, but I want us to look at some of the things that it talks to us about. So, Isai, if you could read 1 Samuel 17, 1 to 3.
Sure. It says, David and Goliath. Now the Philistines gathered their forces for war and assembled at Soko in Judah. They pitched camp at Ephes Damim, between Soko and Azekah. Saul and the Israelites assembled and camped in the valley of Elah and drew up their battle lines to meet the Philistines. The Philistines occupied one hill and the Israelites another, with the valley between them.
One thing I'm seeing here is a very descriptive account of where they were at, right? Of where this battle took place. And the lesson talked about that there's been some excavations going on, and they've actually found a fortified garrison city from those times, right? That is in this place, looking over this valley. And actually have one of my personal friends, Corey Johnson. He was actually telling me that he was on one of these expeditions, and he took a trip, and he was actually able to stand in this valley. So what we're seeing here is that these places, this is not like a fairy tale or something where it's imaginary places, right? But these are actual physical locations. What are your thoughts on these proofs or these different clues that we can find in scripture and in archaeology?
Yeah, for me, it's fascinating, right? I mean, we all in a way long for a better world, right? I mean, those of us who like stories, it's very easy if you're into that imagination or whatever, and you see people longing to live, in Middle Earth or in Pandora or whatever it is, because a lot of us long for that awe, that sense of awe and epic and connection with the transcendent, and the fact that the Bible offers that, and it's real, right? Like you see proof that these stories happen in this blue planet, and stories were awesome, providing all that transcendence and meaning that we long for. I think it's just such a wonderful real life food for our hearts and imaginations, to see that this epic stuff happened. I think it's, for me, it's awesome.
So good. And
I think just
go ahead.
Just a really brief comment that if this place is real and if this story is real, the miraculous event that happens there can still happen today. And obviously, we don't have like huge giants walking around, but the fact that God can work in miraculous ways, intervening in what seems impossible. God is with us. God is for us.
Yeah, so good.
Yeah.
The lesson talked about two inscriptions that they found with names of one of the sons of Saul, and then in 93 another place where they found an inscription talking about the king of Israel, the king of the house of David. And this is archaeological evidence that these characters, these individuals, it wasn't just a fantasy, but as you guys are saying, it's something real. And if these stories, if these miracles were able to happen, man, we can definitely count on that God that is so real.
I would sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I would say one thing that I think is important, you may have going to tackle it, but while all of this is awesome, there's a temptation that a lot of us fall into, which is to be dependent on those proofs. Oh, well, and then if someone apparently proves us wrong, right? I know, for example, there's some conflict as to where to fit Moses, right? In historical chronology of Egyptian pharaohs. And so, proof can be a blessing, but if someone finds proof to disprove the Bible, then suddenly all our all our beliefs may get a big hit. So I think that it's important to avoid the temptation of resting too much on proof, right? Proof is great. If proof feeds your faith, is great. If some proof comes your way that seems to be shaking the whole thing down, remember that ultimately we're not encouraged to believe in proofs, right? Or to rest solely on that.
Yeah, where are we putting our faith?
Yeah.
Yes, so good.
Yeah.
So good, y'all.
Sure.
The lesson continues talking about Isaiah, Hezekiah, and Sennacherib. I don't know how Sennacherib. I know in Spanish you say like that. How do you say it in English? I have no idea. But
I struggle. It took me 3 years to say Nebuchadnezzar, so.
These are some crazy names, right? We'll get to Nebuchadnezzar here in a bit. But it points us to the chapters of Isaiah 36 and 37 about that the Assyrian armies, right, are coming toward Judah, and this whole story, right, about what's going on here. Any thoughts on this? I honestly need to get more in tune with these stories. These are kind of the stories we don't hear so much about, preached about, but there's something that's really cool about this, because again, the Assyrian army was real. But what are your thoughts on this, guys?
Isai.
I'm processing.
Help me out, man. I think it's again, for me it's the same thing. I think it's great to realize that this is real, that this is not some up. A lot of times there's some temptations of making them all kind of allegorical, or this is just meaning evil and light and dark and good and evil. I think that this is just simply telling us that God existed in the real world, that prophets existed in the real world, that these were people that battle it out just as we do today, and it grounds biblical word in reality, right?
I think one thing.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I think
the Zoom lag, man. Sorry.
We're not scripted. It just shows we're not scripted. I think one thing that we need to constantly be remembering through these different points that we make throughout the weeks, and maybe I'm repeating myself, but that we can't possibly explain away the Bible, and we can't possibly explain the glory of God or explain every detail that is written in the Bible as how and why and where, and I think, like Joel said, these can affirm our faith, but in no way can they prove or be the basis of our faith. I think it's amazing that we can see, because in the world that we live in, these things really did happen, and the world that we live in, God is continuing to work and to fight for us. So good.
In this story, there's this issue with Assyria, right? And the Sennacherib, the king of Assyria, right? He goes against Judah, and he conquers the fortified cities of Judah. That's what it says here in Isaiah 36, right? And then it talks about that some of this history was also uncovered, right? That the lesson describes how there was a wall, right, with that talked about all the different conquests and all these different things. And again, this lesson doesn't go into so much of the details of each story, but really kind of just telling us, hey, like, let's look at this as archaeological finding in this story, and we can see these different clues in the scripture. But it's so good. I love what y'all are talking about. So good. And we know Assyria was real, and then it's going to go into Babylon, right? It talks about Daniel, Nebuchadnezzar, and Babylon. We definitely know, right, that Babylon was real. I know, isn't it in the Museum of England or London, right, that they have one of the walls, or is it Germany? I'm not sure where it is, but there is one of the walls from Nebuchadnezzar. And then the lesson talks about that in 2007 there was a scholar that was in the University of Vienna was working on a project, and they found a tablet from around that time that had a name of a Babylonian official, and that's found in Jeremiah 39:3. But it's so interesting, right? That there's, of course, we don't see all these different things because a lot has been lost, right? So much has been lost throughout the years. But it's so cool that as we continue in the field of archaeology, these small things are able to confirm these things. But I want us to go a little bit into the story of Daniel for a little bit. I've been thinking about more and more and about Babylon and the theme of Babylon in history. But looking at Daniel chapter 1, right, we know the story where he's there and he's kind of standing up for what he believes there, of eating and drinking, of not eating and drinking from the table of Nebuchadnezzar. But what are some thoughts here? What are some things that we could probably take away from the story that can help us in times like these?
Yeah, for me, this was a highlight of the lesson, because you see, I think that, I mean, I may be missing something now, but of all the stories in the Old Testament, the missionary purpose of the covenant that God makes with Israel is better seen or best seen in Daniel, right? The fact that God says, hey, Israel is not doing the job, so I'm going to kind of give them some major nudging for the job, right? So Israel finds themselves in the foreign land. And then how cool is it to see God's effort to, through his covenant people, reach out to Nebuchadnezzar and to the whole of Babylon, right? Because Nebuchadnezzar literally kind of preaches the God of the Jews, right, to all his nation. And we know that Babylon was this epic major empire of unseen beauty and riches. So I think it's awesome to see that, right? Jesus, I was reading this on the Gospel of Matthew when he talks about, I think this is in the story of the Roman centurion, right? And he says, hey, like, I haven't seen a better faith than this. And then from the east and the west, people will come and sit down with on the table with Isaac and Jacob, right? This idea that the covenant in God's people is the whole world, and the whole nation is to be reached, and will sit with Israel, the people that have been faithful to him from the beginning, and relate to God and learn from God. And I just think it's so cool to see that. I don't know. Anyhow, I'm not trying to preach, but I just think it's awesome.
Oh, so good, man. Isai, what are your thoughts, man?
I think that we can see in the story of Daniel chapter 1, especially the faithfulness of Daniel and his friends, and how they, I guess just to like condense the story a little bit, right? But to how we see how Daniel's faithfulness places him in the right situation, in the right attitude, the right situation, the right relationship with the king, to be able to play such a key role in world history, in a role with King Nebuchadnezzar, and to be able to be the one that God gives Nebuchadnezzar the dream, Daniel interprets, and Nebuchadnezzar, like you mentioned, Joel, like Nebuchadnezzar actually is used by God to share, this incredible story of how God is working and intervening in world history.
Yeah,
I love it. I think just as Daniel, he's in, and I love how you say that God placed him there. I think all of us, just with everything that's going on, I believe that we're placed in a sense of that God knew that we were going to be living in a time such as this. And if an empire that standed for oppression, an empire that did, the works, of the enemy, if Daniel, a simple person, a person, that stood for the Lord in that kingdom. I think that you and I, all of us here, those who are listening, I think God can use us as well. And I think it's so relevant for us because Babylon, and I guess I'm going into another topic, but it's a kingdom that continued on, and that's where we get into the time of Jesus. At the time of Jesus, the Babylon that was there, right, was Rome, right, and it continued to, and this with this idea of oppression, of greed.
Yeah.
But Jesus was it's so amazing that Jesus was able to do such an amazing work, the most influential man ever was able to work and to do something so amazing in that time. And then the lesson, it points us to a couple verses, and the reason why it points us to, for example, Matthew 26, John 11, and then John 18. It's pointing us to the names of Caiaphas and then of Pontius Pilate. And the lesson just tells us here that these individuals, that has been some proofs, right? There's been some archaeological findings, just as the other stories, that there was, those actual people named Caiaphas and, Pontius Pilate. For example, in 1990, it talks about a tomb that was found, where it talked about where there was bones, and in one of these boxes, pretty much what it was, like a type of coffin or something, but talked about Joseph, son of Caiaphas. So this could be something that points us, to, since it was around the same time, like the first century, they pointed back. This could be connected to Caiaphas, the priest that was involved in the death of Jesus. So this is other proof, because Jesus wasn't historical. What are some of your thoughts here before we continue?
I mean, every time I think, especially of Pilate, but also, I don't know how to say his name in English. Caiaphas?
Sure.
Good.
Caiaphas. There you go.
Caiaphas.
It kind of, going along with Daniel and his availability, and Jesus and his availability to be a world changer for the sake of God, is how terrible it is for this people, these two individuals, that they're remembered by Jesus in a corrupt trial, and not having enough spine to defend him, but actually delivering him to crucify, right? So, it just makes me think, how do you want to be remembered in history, right? If you and I mean, all of us are part of this story that is ongoing beyond the pages of the Bible. So how do we want to be remembered? Like Daniel or like Pilate,
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
Man, that's so good.
That's so.
This lesson, again, it's pointing us to this historical things, and there's so much proof Jesus was a real person. Different secular historians talk about Jesus, that he was a real person. And I guess to kind of just close off and to finish up, I guess, with this, because I think we kind of talked about it with Thursday's lesson, but we look at these stories and we see the different things that, oh man, this is kind of a stretch, right? If we really think about it kind of rationally and try to, there are a lot of things we don't see. But if Jesus was real, if Jesus was a living, breathing human that walked in the first century in Judea, that just points me to what C.S. Lewis said. I don't know if y'all remember talking about. I think it's in Mere Christianity, but it's something along the lines of, if you believe that Jesus existed and that he was a good teacher, but if you don't, if you're able to see what he said and all these different things, the claims that he did, that he was the Son of God, the claims that he made, such grand claims, that he was the way, the truth, and the life. he can't just be a good teacher. He can't just be a man that existed. You know, it couldn't. We can't accept it. If that's false, it means he was insane. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it goes down to either he is who he says he is, or he's a monster, right? Because for a mere human that claims that he made, that doesn't make him a good teacher, right?
Mm-hmm.
You claim divinity, you're either a terrible
lunatic,
imposter, or you are.
Yeah. So either he's lunatic, liar, or Lord.
Yeah. And which should be the case of everything that we do, right? I think that when I teach preaching to my colleagues in the local church, elders or whatever, I tell them that ultimately the whole point here is to have a personal encounter with God, right? Mm-hmm. When you preach, you should encourage people to have a personal encounter with God, and for you to make a choice as to how are you going to react to Him, how are you going to respond to God. And I think that historical proof should do that. Historical proof should not just be, oh, that's a nice little thing there,
Fun fact.
Yeah, fun fact. Fun fact makes me think that I'm not totally crazy, right? No. The point is to be confronted with Jesus, the historical reality of Jesus, and make a choice. Is he just a nice guy? Not possible. So either he is who he is, or he's not at all. And if he is who he is, then my response should be appropriate to the truth of his claims. And otherwise, not, but this kind of existing between two waters that a lot of us Christians do, it just makes no sense.
Man, man, it's so good. I think we kind of come to a conclusion there. But I want to finish off with this, where it tells us here on Thursday's lesson. It says, "A faith is not simply a belief in something or someone. It is acting in response to that belief. It is a faith that works. That is what is reckoned as righteousness." How is your response going to be? What is your response going to be to these stories, to the archaeological findings, and how Joel is saying, what's going to be your response to Jesus, to his invitation?
Yeah.
And I think, what is our response going to be? Are we going to act in faith in response to the word of God? Any final thoughts, gentlemen?
There's so much more. I mean, our response, I think of the time that we live in right now, and what is going to be our response as a church, right? We call ourselves the body of Christ.
Yes.
So if we believe in the historical reality of Jesus and accept the claims that he made and see the life that he lived, then our response to all of that should be felt, shouldn't be an intellectual response. It should be a fruitful, like the Bible says, response, right? And a response that is felt, that your family sees it, your community sees it, your church community sees it. And that is, I think that response, just repeating it, but I think that response is very urgent right now, that we make a choice.
Yeah, I agree. I think faith is not a gathering of beliefs or of knowledge, but faith is acted out. When we recognize these things, when we recognize that this is something that we can ground ourselves in, we stand firm in our faith in Jesus, and our faith requires or calls us to act and to respond and to be the hands and feet of Jesus to all.
Yeah, so good. I think we could probably conclude there, but I just want to leave with you all a question to think about, to ponder on this Sabbath.
Yeah, so this is a rhetorical question. Yeah,
it's a rhetorical question.
There you go.
All right, is how will you respond? How will you live out? What changes will you make in response to the invitation of Jesus to follow him? How will your life change? how will you react? How will you respond to others, especially in this time of suffering and pain? How will you respond? God bless you all. Hope you have a happy Sabbath. Glad that you joined us once again, and we will be back next Sabbath, hopefully with Carlos and Eliab, but
Pray for them, guys.
we'll see.
There you go.
Pray for them.
All right. Love you guys. Take care.
Take care. God bless.